Hey ladies and gents, welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, where we talk about video games and everything happening in the industry, episode 225. I'm your host, Jerrad Wyche. As always, I am joined by my co-host, Dominic Orlando.
Praise the sun. Praise the sun.
Actually, it's not as always, because you missed maybe the last couple of episodes? Maybe the last one? I don't exactly remember. But it's good to have you back.
It's more like usually sometimes.
Yeah, usually most of the time, sometimes.
Yeah.
Almost always. Is the official phrasing there. We have a bit of news to cover. A lot of Jeff Grubb stuff. This is the Jeff Grubb Spectacular. Obviously the writer over Venture Beat, who's responsible for a lot of rumors and reports and stuff. If you're familiar with the sports world, he's the Adam Schefter or the Woj of the gaming world right now, at least this year so far. Been having a lot of stuff come out. He doesn't really report stuff unless he has concrete information. It's weird, Dom. It's like he's a respected journalist who takes his job seriously, which is good to see. You know, we have the Jason Schreiers of the world, but it's good to see some other people rising to the top, which is cool. Got quite a bit of news to get to. I guess we'll start with some bummer news in the Quickie News Rundown, Dom. I hate to say it because I know you've been looking forward to this game. Deathloop was officially announced to have a delay. It was originally intended to release last year, and then it got pushed to May 21st of this year, and now it's been pushed to September 14th, 2021, a week before my birthday. As someone who was interested in this game, how do you feel about the delay, Dom, and in relation to all the other delays we're getting this year as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bummer, right? I was looking forward to it, but it's also not a surprise. I think that's kind of what a lot of people have said, that, this is where we're going to see most of the COVID delays. It's kind of like a staggered reaction to it, where like the impact of having to work remotely, it's kind of hit some months after the fact. And I think this is probably the case here, where maybe, in a world without a pandemic, that, this doesn't happen, and it maybe even had already come out at this point. Who knows? But whatever they need, I guess, take your time.
And some interesting comments from Jeff Grubb, VentureBeat, as I mentioned, Imran Khan of Fanbyte, and some other people on Twitter were saying that the thing people need to keep in mind is these delays aren't an issue of work from home specifically. They're an issue of work from home in a pandemic, which I think people need to understand the difference there. Like if, studios move to a work from home culture, that wouldn't really affect development as much as everything on top of that with the pandemic, right? Not being able to go places, having to quarantine, all that stuff. So it's not the first delay we got this year. Probably won't be the last. I hope it makes 2021, because I could easily see this game getting pushed again. But for everyone who's excited for it, I hope it doesn't, especially when you consider that the exclusivity window doesn't trigger for this game until it releases. So every delay it sees is another delay in terms of when Xbox gamers will be able to play this game on their platform, because people forget this is a PlayStation exclusive. So it's kind of a bummer for everyone.
Delay, yeah.
Yeah. The year of the backlog is what it seems so far, and it'll probably continue. It's nice to see. It's not nice to see a delay, but it's nice to see a delay that isn't from Warner Brothers games, because WB Games has been the one on the forefront with Gotham Knights and Hogwarts Legacy and all of their titles. Next up, speaking of Xbox, this was actually covered came out like a week and a half ago, but we didn't do a show last week because some stuff came up. MLB The Show 21, Dom, is not only coming to Xbox, which you already knew, it's launching into Xbox Game Pass, which is pretty wild. There's a lot of conjecture over this happening. One thing to keep in mind is the game is being published by the Major League Baseball publishing house on the platform, which kind of clarifies how this is possible. But neither of us were able to react to this when it happened. How do you feel about this, PlayStation first-party developed game launching into Xbox Game Pass, Dom?
I mean, it's weird, right? It feels weird, but I feel like there's been a lot of, hyperbole, or not hyperbole, but just overreaction and like personalization somehow, where this to me is only good, right? This is a game that was, previously very I don't want to say inaccessible, but it was only on one platform, for past iterations of it. And so now, not only is it on another platform, but it's really cheap and affordable on that platform. And so even though it feels weird, like, because it's developed by a Sony first party game or studio, right, that it not only is on Xbox but is on Game Pass. It feels weird, but like I think it's cool. Like, why not, right? I'm sure Sony probably didn't realize, or maybe they did and just like accepted it, that this could happen, because it's not a great look for them, but that doesn't bother me, right? I think it's cool that
exactly.
More people are going to be able to get to play the game, right? I'm not into baseball much, but I think it's cool.
Well, I'm not a huge baseball guy either, but I'm going to definitely play this because it's launching in Game Pass.
Yeah,
but that's the core of my perspective on this is I don't know a lot of people who are necessarily baseball people. Like, the sport is very popular, sure, but it's nowhere near the NBA, which is nowhere near the NFL. It's easily the third most popular sport in the United States, despite it being like America's pastime. And I do think that this is the MLB, not the Game Pass thing, but them coming to Xboxes. I do think it's a sport that's kind of suffering from a lack of growth and interest from the younger generation. And I do think they're seeing the tea leaves that they need to do something about that. And having your premier sports title on one platform just isn't helping at all, really, as successful as PlayStation is in terms of selling hardware. And I think not only bringing it to Xbox, but launching it into Game Pass, you're getting the sport into the hands of people at a really accessible price. And you're going to likely find people who fall in love with baseball or re-fall in love with baseball after not being interested in it. And I think it's a good move for the sport itself. For PlayStation, obviously, it's a bummer move because from their perspective, because it's like, not only did we have to have it come to Xbox, it's launching into Game Pass when we're going to be charging $70 for it at launch, which is a tough pill to swallow. But for everyone else, it's awesome. Because PlayStation gamers, they have to get incentivized somehow to show why are we paying $70 for this and what makes us playing on PlayStation better. And I'm assuming there will probably be some DLC or other content that isn't detrimental to the experience, right, that's offered on PlayStation in some capacity. For Xbox, they finally get a premier baseball game again. For the sport of baseball, they have people trying it out and maybe falling in love with the sport. And for baseball fans themselves, they have options on where to play the game and how to purchase it. So I think it's huge. I think it's cool.
Yeah, that's a good perspective of I hadn't really thought about that yet from the MLB's perspective. Not just, obviously they always want to be bigger, but especially because, they've kind of been, I don't know if it's shrinking, but you're right, like baseball has been waning in popularity somewhat. So that's definitely got to, like, this is like an easy opportunity for them, like something they can do to, like, get baseball to the front of more people's minds.
Yeah, and you think about, like, not only are there people out there that are like, I like baseball, but not enough to pay $70 for a new game.
Right.
And then you put it into Game Pass, and it's like, oh, I have Game Pass, I'm going to check it out, and who knows what happens there. And then you maybe get them into the microtransaction parts, which brings in money as well, and it all works out for everyone. So it's funny that we often talked about, will Game Pass ever come to PlayStation? What'll happen there? And now we're seeing for the first time a PlayStation game on an Xbox console via Xbox Game Pass. It's so funny. But like I said, it is awesome. Next up, speaking of more awesome news, Dom, Alan Wake 2, the sequel everyone has wanted to that beloved horror game. According to Jeff Grubb, and this starts our Jeff Grubb rundown, according to him, Remedy's project that they're working on with Epic Games, I don't know if you remember, Dom, we had talked about how they formed like a collaboration partnership with Epic Games to like publish their next couple of games or whatever. I think it was like a 2-game deal. They did it with them, they did it with Playdead, and they did it with another studio who I can't remember off the top of my head. But apparently one of the games they're working on is a sequel to the cult classic horror title Alan Wake. I'm stoked about this. Obviously, I want Control 2 as soon as possible as well because I love Control, but I've wanted them to return to the world of Alan Wake. We had it teased in Quantum Break and referenced. We had it referenced in the last DLC for Control. So it's dope to see this. What does Alan Wake 2 being in development do for you, Dom?
I didn't hear this until just now.
Oh, wow.
This is great. I feel like I'm that guy from that meme who's like in the club and then Osama bin Laden was killed and all of a sudden I'm super hyped or whatever. That reference might not make sense if you don't know what I'm talking about, but no, this is great news. The first one was excellent. I absolutely adored it. And yeah, I really like Control too, but like I also just got done playing Control, so like if I got to choose which which I want next, I'd be like, set me up with Alan Wake 2, my friends at Remedy. I'm pumped.
I'm so excited. I'm interested to see where like they take a modern horror game, especially with the tech that they're able to throw into Control, and I'm just fascinated at what they could do with a second Alan Wake. And this is probably the only way this game would happen, unfortunately, because we've seen Remedy make great games and they don't particularly sell well. Just as a problem they've had, and then partnering with Epic Games kind of gives them that cushion to be able to tackle this. It's something we've talked about with Xbox acquiring studios and even PlayStation acquiring Insomniac. Is like, yeah, it sucks that these studios are no longer independent, but the financial support they have allows them to tackle projects that they want to, especially with like Xbox Game Pass, right? We talked about that, where these teams can work on smaller projects like Grounded that aren't going to sell through the roof, but allow them to release their creative juices into the world in some capacity. So Alan Wake 2, I can't wait. Hopefully it's sooner than later, but I'm still thinking like 2023 at the earliest, but who knows? We'll see. Let's get to the first of our two big stories, Dom. E3 is returning. In some capacity, anyways. So this is from various sources. The event is returning as the Electronic Entertainment Experience. If you're like, that's what I assumed E3 stood for. It used to stand for the Electronic Entertainment Expo. So since they're no longer an expo this year and they're a digital, all digital event, it's an experience. It'll be free to all attendees, which there was some conjecture about charging for stuff, and the SA kind of said no, things will be free. Still some wiggle room there if they might have some premium stuff for people to pay, but who knows? For now, it seems like everything's going to be free to people. The ESA announced in a press release that the conference will take place from June 12th to June 15th with the tagline, quote, "Game on," unquote. So around that normal time we expect from E3, right? That second week of June, which is pretty dope. And you're wondering, well, yeah, what is it going to be? Are they going to have like 3 people who we've never heard of come up there and present something? They've already confirmed some partners. They haven't confirmed what exactly they're doing, but we'll get into what Jeff Grubb had to say about that. So their confirmed partners so far, Dom: Nintendo, Xbox, Capcom, Konami, Ubisoft, Take-Two Interactive, Warner Brothers Games, Koch Media will all be presenting new products and games at the expo. Now, before we get into what Grubb has to say about what these companies will show off, just off the bat, hearing all those partners, are you surprised that many people were willing enough to even partner with the SCA this year, despite there not being an in-person thing and them being able to do their own videos and digital stuff?
Yeah, because that's basically everybody. Every one of the big players. That's the majority of them. So yeah, I'm curious to see like what exactly is this going to look like? Because what's the incentive? Like, why would Nintendo bother being a part of this? They could do whatever they wanted. Yeah, so someone like Nintendo could do their own entire presentation, their own directive, whatever scope they wanted at the same time, or during the same week. I'm curious to see like what's the motivation for these big publishers and players to be a part of this. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm anxious to hear more about it.
Well, and I'm curious because I haven't actually gone through the analytics and looked at stuff, but I wonder if, we talk about, oh yeah, well, PlayStation, Nintendo, Microsoft can do whatever they want at any point during the year because they'll have eyes on them, and we assume people like Ubisoft or even Take-Two could do the same thing and get eyes on them. But I wonder if most people were wrong in that assumption, and these publishers saw that, outside of Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony, that like, yeah, we got a good number of eyes, but it's nowhere near the traffic we see for E3. And I wonder if they saw like, it was kind of a mishmash and trouble kind of setting up our own schedule and setting a date. Yeah, we can make the video ourselves, but all of the other stuff that goes into marketing the event and all of that, and it might be easier just to like attach ourselves to something else on top of the fact, like I just said, maybe they do get more traffic for E3, and despite them being in the news cycle for like 8 hours until the next event comes up, maybe that's a good trade-off when you lose traffic, even though you own it for like more days, right? Who knows? We don't know the analytics behind that. But the fact that they have this many people tells me that there's some reason why they would partner with them. And I doubt the ESA strong-armed them into this. I just wonder if it's an analytics-driven thing where they were like, yeah, last year was neat to do our own thing, but there was so many other ramifications we don't think about that it might just be easier to attach yourself to this wagon.
And I'd be curious, though, specifically what the ESA brings to the table, because even with that, you could still do something this same week. You could still, imitate that same exact thing, except what? There's not an E3 logo on your presentation, or someone has to use a different link to get there. Like what if Sony does a state of play that's really big, the day after Xbox has a presentation, just because Sony wasn't a part of E3 proper, like, what does that mean? That's what I'm not understanding, I guess. I'm curious to see what it looks like, what it means.
Well, and that's a tough thing because it's like a chicken and egg thing of like, do people get interested in E3 because it's named E3 and they know everybody's going to be there? Or do they get interested because everybody's going to be there, but it just so happens to be labeled E3, and then that's what builds the anticipation for E3, right? And I think it's probably a little bit of column A and column B. Most people know what E3 is in terms of gamers who are going to watch it to begin with, right? Like, they know what E3 is. It's a week-long event where you see a bunch of presentations. And yeah, Microsoft or Nintendo can put their presentation in that week, but it's not like grouped up, so you don't know necessarily if they're both going to be in the same week, right? And we talked about this last year. The reason I missed E3 so much, it wasn't even for the ESA. Like, if Jeff Keighley were to step in and do the Jeff Keighley week or whatever, and he brings everybody together, when that goes back to your question of then why would they all do it in the same week? Last year sucked in terms of announcements. Not the stuff that was announced. We saw a bunch of dope games, but like the summer game mess and like these drawn out things where you see the same trailer at 12 different events and you kind of had to keep track of the schedule. That sucked. And in my opinion, like I said, I haven't done the analytics research, but I doubt it was like a stellar success. I'm pretty sure that maybe people were a little bit upset with the turnout they got for some of that stuff. And I think at the end of the day, people maybe just want to group up because it's easier. And your question is great for like the Microsofts and Nintendos and Sonys, but a lot of these other people, I kind of just get it. Like, I don't need an explanation. It's like, yeah, they probably just don't want to deal with all of that shit. Forget my language. Let's just put us in a thing where people will be watching, I don't know.
All right. And of course it's good for the smaller studio. Like that's the other thing here that
indies,
we don't always we don't always consider too, kind of selfishly, but some smaller games that can get, wedged into, a Microsoft presentation, for example, and all of a sudden they're getting some visibility they might not have otherwise, right? So that's the other part that makes sense. But like that's kind of a separate, I guess, conversation. But yeah.
Your question was on the right track, though, Dom, because I have a follow-up here. So this is all information from Jeff Grubb, the first one being, according to Jeff Grubb, many companies were planning to hold their summer media presentations during the second week of June with or without the E3 branding, according to a source familiar with the plans.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're dead on. I wanted to hold that and surprise you with that because, according to Jeff Grubb, these companies are exactly thinking that. They're like, well, we don't necessarily need E3. We're going to do it in that week, though, because I think it is important. People know when E3 is. I think they care more about when E3 is than the E3 branding, right? So it's like, we'll go second week of June, but who cares? And if the ESA is holding it and doing all the marketing and all of that stuff, and it's like, if we're doing it that week anyways, let's just attach ourselves to that. Who cares? You know what I mean? It's like a bonus as opposed to like a need at that point.
Right. That's starting to make more sense, yeah.
Yeah, I thought I was waiting. When you said that question, I was like, oh, he's going to love this when we get to this point because you nailed it. Some more from Jeff Grubb's article. Quote, this year, assuming we do not encounter another global crisis by June, Nintendo will return with another full-scale General Direct showcase. Microsoft, meanwhile, will package together Xbox and Bethesda into back-to-back showcases with games like Halo and potentially a new Forza and Bethesda's spacefaring role-playing adventure Starfield. This is interesting. First of all, I'm glad we're getting a Nintendo full-scale Direct. I think people have wanted that. I've wanted that. We've kind of been missing out on that. And the Microsoft thing is cool because I do like them splitting Xbox and Bethesda. Though they're all under one umbrella now, we've seen Bethesda has enough to hold their own event. And some people can argue like it could easily be part of something else and it's not the full-on showcase that people would want from a publisher. But it being like, Xbox goes first and then they pass the baton over to Bethesda, I think that's awesome because there's a delineation for people who are only interested in Bethesda games. But also because they're combined, each of them gain something from them being back-to-back where they don't need to overfill the Xbox show with filler. And Bethesda also doesn't need to have filler, right? What do you think about both the Nintendo thing and the Xbox Bethesda showcase plans?
I mean, yeah, I'm hyped for Nintendo. I mean, there's got to be more, right? There's got to be more. even just for this year, or even if it's going into next year, that they can show us, like, there's got to be more. I'm just excited for it. And it also just now clicked in my head that, like, we're a chunk of the way into April, and so this is actually not that. This is 2 months away, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
As far as as far as the Bethesda stuff, it makes a lot of sense actually. You could have went either way, but like Microsoft has huge shows the last couple years, especially, right? Their E3 shows are like tons of content,
like
right?
2 hours, and it's like game after game after game.
Yeah, and it's great, and that's great. But I think if you were to just tack on, Bethesda to that, that's even more. I don't want to say bloated because it's all good stuff, but it might be
exhausting.
Just be too long.
I think would be appropriate. It's just a lot, yeah.
Exactly, and so then it's almost because Microsoft's portfolio is so big now, just itself, not even considering obviously what they're doing with partners, but like from their own perspective, it might be good to stretch stuff out. Like they don't want to compete with themselves too much and eat themselves. You know what I mean? So it makes sense to have Bethesda split out a little bit. I'm sure that things will be acknowledged, and obviously like they're the same. They're part of the same company now, so it's not like they're gonna be totally independent. But yeah, I think it makes sense. It's kind of what I expected almost. I had considered like, oh, there just won't be a Bethesda conference anymore at all, and then we'll just see a couple Bethesda games littered into the Microsoft conference. But that just, I don't know, it doesn't feel quite right to me, and I think it kind of takes away from what Bethesda has built, and what they were able to get to this point the last couple of years where they did have enough going on where they justify their own conference every year. So I think Xbox wanted to keep that momentum that Bethesda had going. So I think it makes sense.
And every Bethesda game that would have been placed into the Xbox show eliminates either an indie or a third-party partnership that we wouldn't see. You know what I mean? So that's kind of a bummer too. So I'm glad that they're kind of separate. And his last quote here, quote, "Digital events are easier to plan and live stream, so expect a lot of companies to continue trying to hold their own. But more major publishers may start holding their own events. Electronic Arts and PlayStation will each have something, but also expect a Square Enix Presents, a Bandai Namco Next, and more. But don't hold your breath that everything will happen around the week of E3. So he's basically saying, like, the digital events are easier to plan and live stream, meaning that don't be surprised if other people that aren't currently partnered with E3 attach themselves to it. But in the same breath, don't be surprised if these major publishers, because they want to hold their own events as well, don't do it around E3. Electronic Arts, I think, is the most surprising one that's not attached to E3 already, Dom. PlayStation, I totally get, though I hope they're around June. And then Square Enix and Bandai Namco, I also totally get. How do you feel about this in terms of, do you hope that these other publishers plan something in June at least? Doesn't need to be that second week, but near it? Or are you like, yeah, just show me when you want to show me stuff. I don't really mind.
Yeah, obviously, like, I want to see more from Sony. Like, I hope they do a big old state of play, the first week of June, the last week of June, middle of May. I don't, whatever. I just want it, right? I want to see more about Ragnarok and Forbidden West and so on, right? So like, it's cool. Like I get, like, it's fun, like E3 week, and like that's exciting. I'm into that. Like, so if it'd be cooler if they were like in some kind of proximity to that. But if it isn't, I'll survive, I guess. To me, what matters most is seeing what they have going on.
Yeah, PlayStation I'm not too worried about because like most of their state of plays have been pretty good and they know what they're doing. The Electronic Arts thing is like, I don't know if most people are going to want to tune in to like a thing when they know that majority of it's going to be sports games they're not interested in. That's an event where people will just wait till afterwards and watch the VODs on YouTube, right? So I don't know if they actually benefit from doing their own presentation unless they separate it. Unless it's like, here's our EA Sports presentation and then here's our other stuff. Because that could work. Because you get all the people who are interested in all the sports games in one, and then you get all the people who are interested in everything else. Even like a BioWare Presents would be dope, where it's just for BioWare with their projects. And then Square Enix and Bandai Namco, I would almost guarantee we're going to see some of their games at the Xbox thing, right? And especially Bandai Namco and Nintendo. So they'll have some presence during that E3 week, but it might not be all of their games. That's that. E3 is returning. I'm personally excited because I like the condensed nature of things. I think it works best when we have that condensed E3 and then we do have the state of plays and directs throughout the year. But I just really hated last year. I thought it was such a jumbled mess, and it was just such, I don't know. It just kind of ruined the whole spectacle of it for me, if I'm being honest. Let's get to this Xbox Kojima rumbling from Jeff Grubb. This was weird. So this trailer for this game called Abandoned came out. It's this first-person survival strategy horror game. Survival horror, not really I don't know why I said strategy. The developer on the game doesn't really have a big history. No one really knew about this game, and it kind of showed up out of nowhere. So people started, as the internet does, thinking, is this the next Kojima Productions project? And he's kind of like being coy, being secretive, and no one knows what it is. And unfortunately, the developer had to come out and say, like, no, we have no attachment to Kojima. This is nothing. But this allowed Jeff Grubb to write up this report about some news. Obviously, I said it's Xbox plus Kojima. Whatever could that mean? Well, according to Jeff Grubb, there are currently discussions between Xbox, Microsoft, and Hideo Kojima when it comes to publishing the next game release from Kojima Productions. Here's what Jeff revealed. 1. Kojima is in talks with Microsoft about publishing his next game, according to a source familiar with the matter. 2. Yes, that statue on Phil Spencer's shelf was referencing a potential deal with the legendary developer. I don't know if you remember, Don, we talked about the latest thing that Phil did where there was the Lumens guy behind him on his shelf, and people were like, is that like a tease that Death Stranding's coming to Game Pass? Because it was near when Death Stranding had recently gone to PC. So that's pretty cool. 3, I cannot confirm if Xbox closed the deal yet, but my understanding is that Kojima is the focus of a Microsoft plan to leverage Japanese talent. 4, on April 8th, the day we're recording this, Kinda Funny Games Daily Show, Jeff Grubb went on in the show to state it's his understanding that the deal is currently in the lawyer state of development. So they're kind of just hashing out the deal now. Now, obviously, things can turn sideways. Lawyers don't agree. Deal's not finalized. Most of the time, though, when it reaches this state where their lawyers are going over the wording in a deal, that's kind of where they reach the finish line. I want to tackle these one by one, Dom, and talk about them individually, these points that he brought up. So first, Kojima is in talks with Microsoft about publishing his next game, according to a source familiar with the matter. The interesting thing about his next game is we recently had one of the creative leads at Kojima Productions tease that the reveal of that next game is soon, right? I think he was the lead art director or something. I don't remember his name specifically. I guess what I want you to give your opinion on here, Dom, is is it surprising that Kojima's talking to Microsoft? And B, what do you think this means for Sony's relationship with him in terms of, wouldn't it be most obvious that he just works with them again after Death Stranding?
I mean, I guess, but why not? Why not make a game for Xbox too? Maybe they offered something that was a little better. I don't know. No
a larger check, perhaps.
Exactly, right? And not to say that, and maybe Sony probably would have matched it even, and that doesn't, just felt like working with a different publisher, whatever whatever the reason. And maybe there's something specific about, the Series X or something he wanted to take advantage of. You never know. But no, I think this is cool. This is great. I remember when we first heard about Kojima Productions being formed, it was a point of clarification, well, this isn't a Sony first party studio though. Sony's publishing this one game, and they're putting some money into it or whatever, but they don't own this studio, and Kojima wanted to remain independent. And to me, it makes a lot of sense to not get too tied to one publisher, to be honest, because I joked with you and Chris about well, Death Stranding 2 exclusive to Xbox, but I really doubt that, to be totally honest. I'm guessing this is a brand new IP, and that's probably part of what he wanted. I want to do something new, and maybe Sony wanted Death Stranding 2 more, and Xbox was oh yeah, do something new. Heck yeah, bring it here. We got you, I think it's something also assuming that. He has a lot of leverage.
Yeah, for sure. Not attaching yourself, you can hear the bidders, right, and choose which one has the highest offer, best offer.
Right.
And because of his legacy, we're also assuming that everything went well with PlayStation. We don't know that. I'm not saying it was dire or bad, but we don't know if Death Stranding performed the way they wanted based on how much they invested in it. Like, we don't know exactly what happened. And maybe it's not like a sour situation where has a bad relationship with them as he does with Konami, but maybe it is like Sony's like, hey, we're going to chill on this one. Maybe we'll publish one in the future, but we're good for now kind of thing. We never know. Like,
he had made some kind of like dissenting comments. It was more, I can't remember exactly what he said, and of course who knows how it translated, but it was more in regards to like how critics reviewed Death Stranding.
Yeah.
He had some complaints about it, the way that, and maybe it was like also about like just gamers in general and our lack of ability to do new things, something pretentious or whatever. And he's Kojima, so it's fine.
And the thing too that we can't overlook is like, my assumption is the Kojima thing kind of got handled when Sean Layden was still the man in charge over there, right? And Sean Layden's very personable, and Jim Ryan isn't, and Phil Spencer is very personable. So maybe him having discussions with those people, maybe he just jives better with Phil Spencer now where he jived with Sean Layden, right? Who knows? Because there's a lot of stuff going on currently where people are questioning what's going on with Jim Ryan and the leadership of PlayStation. A little gloom and doom hyperbolic stuff, which I don't necessarily agree with, but if you've listened to this podcast, you know I've been sus of Jim Ryan from day one, ever since he made those dumb Minecraft comments, but who knows what'll happen there. I want to say, too, the other week when Chris and I were doing the podcast when we were talking about that story about Kojima Productions and the creative lead teasing that their new game is going to be revealed soon-ish, I made the comment, I was like, how wild, impossibly wild would it be if his next game was an Xbox exclusive? And then this came out, and I was like, that's so funny.
Pretty much how it's going to be.
Yeah.
Almost certainly, right?
If the deal closes, yeah. The second point we don't really need to touch on, Phil's really good at teasing stuff, and I think he understands now that if he puts something, people are going to expect something from it, and I like that now in hindsight, he did put that Lumens figure back there because he knew what could possibly be, as opposed to it just being empty, veiled hints that he is trolling people, right? Like, even if the deal never came to fruition, we would have eventually probably heard about it falling through, but we would have known that was a tease towards that, right? Like, he actually did it with some purpose, which I appreciate, because he could just easily troll people and none of it matters, but I like that he's making it a part of his teases for Xbox, which is cool.
Yeah. That kind of stuff there's no risk. There's only potential reward, right?
Exactly.
Maybe they had only just sent the first email from Kojima or something, and he'd put that in there. It's like, well, if it never happens, it doesn't matter. But if it does, someone will pull this back up and think it's great, and it'll be a little headline or something. Yeah.
Yeah, low risk, high reward, because it's fun to look back at. Next up, he said he can't confirm the deal is done yet, but the Kojima thing is part of a focus of Microsoft's plan to leverage Japanese talent. This is interesting because he doesn't say to leverage Hideo Kojima's talent or Hideo Kojima's spotlight or fame or anything like that. It specifically says leverage Japanese talent, which leads me to believe, Dom, that this might not be the only exclusivity deal we see from Microsoft with a Japanese studio, right? Leveraging Japanese talent seems to me like a core ideology of the Xbox, if this is true, according to Jeff Grubb, is something they're focusing on in multiple branches. And to me, Elden Ring is not exclusive, we already know that, but I wonder if we eventually hear of them striking a deal with From, because we saw how successful Bloodborne was and how much it helped out the PS4 along with all of its other great games on the platform. But this to me says, like, don't be surprised if we hear about another exclusive game from a Japanese studio, right?
Well, not only that, but I think we tend to focus on like exclusives a lot. Like, I don't, leveraging Japanese talent. I don't think that just means for exclusives, right? It's just like historically, like there's not been as much Japanese games on Xbox systems, right?
Well,
so it's like
until the last couple of years, right, where he brought the whole Yakuza series over to Game Pass. He brought Kingdom Hearts.
Changing now in a big way, right? But yeah, I think it's just in general. I think we focus a lot on the exclusive part of it, but I think I have to assume that like sometimes things just don't happen, not even necessarily because there's some wall of exclusivity that's legally bound, but maybe just because the relationships don't exist. Like maybe for example, like Persona, right? Like why aren't those games on Xbox? Like to me, it's hard to imagine that there's some like everlasting exclusivity preventing it. Like maybe it's just like a relationship just hasn't been developed, and so it just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah,
and like something could bring it in a multi-platform kind of way. It just comes to Xbox because of these kind of efforts that Phil's making.
Yeah, and to your point, leverage doesn't mean exclusivity. Leverage means leverage, right? And you can do that in a number of ways. The exclusivity is one for sure. Two, it's, okay, this game's launching on PlayStation and Xbox. We're getting a Game Pass day one, right? That's leverage.
Right, yep.
There's plenty of ways to have that leverage. Timed exclusives, a bunch of stuff. Content, whatever. But yeah, to your point, it doesn't necessarily mean exclusives, but it does mean a focus on Japanese talent to some capacity. And he's shown it recently, and people make fun of like, oh, those flights to Japan are really paying off, and they are. And who knows, Dom, we're sitting here in June watching the Xbox E3 event, and the Atlas logo comes up, and Persona 5 does come to Xbox, right? Who knows?
Right. And so that's what I'm saying is like just getting that at all would be leverage. It would be leveraging Japanese, Final Fantasy Remake, like that's got to be, I think that's supposed to be coming soon. We hope, we assume, right? But
yeah. Well, the deal ends tomorrow, I think, for Final Fantasy VII
right.
Remake. So after that point, Square can talk about it for PC or Xbox or whatever. So who knows? We talk about Xbox compared to PlayStation. PlayStation fantastic exclusives over the last 3 or 4 years. Xbox has been nailing software. They've been nailing services in terms of the software for Xbox Game Pass, but they've been lacking on the big primetime exclusives. And the Japanese thing is, as niche as it is, like it's not a huge part of the gaming demographic in terms of sales. Japanese games and primetime exclusives were like the two big weaknesses. We're seeing the acquisition of all these studios trying to fix the exclusives thing. We're seeing the leveraging of Japanese talent with the Yakuza and all of these games coming over to Xbox. I wonder at what point PlayStation is the weaker of the two, not in terms of sales, because obviously the PS5 is going to continue to sell tremendously well, but in terms of overall package, like at what point is it where the best thing PlayStation has is on par with Xbox, but it's also missing some of this other stuff. And I wonder if that might be the legacy of Jim Ryan at some point, to where he rested on his laurels, and the company did as a whole, and their focus moving from Japan to Western development and a business focus kind of makes them lose the things that kind of separated them, in addition to their tremendous exclusives, right? It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. Who knows?
Yeah, that's like the long play, right? And maybe Sony's too much on the short play, but I think like it's going to be hard to outweigh when you look at like, even if it's like a better value or cheaper, it's hard to outweigh just constant hard hitting great games. You know what I mean? That's kind of, to me, like that's always going to kind of reign supreme. And so like that's like what ultimately is going to level things off. And it seems like we're on the way there. Like everything's in place. Like with the studios that Xbox has formed and the ones they've acquired. I think that's what really makes the difference.
Well, yeah, and with game prices going up too, right, where the games are going to be $70 and Xbox is going to be offering their exclusives and Game Pass, like who knows where that value ends up riding out for people. I don't know. It's going to be a very interesting generation with a lot of moving parts. And I'm not trying to say like, oh, I want Xbox to beat PlayStation, but like we talk about numerous times, I feel bad for PlayStation-only gamers, not because they don't get great exclusives, because obviously they get the best in the business, but with everything else, it seems like they're kind of getting shorthanded with a lot of this stuff, because PlayStation doesn't feel the need to, because they don't need to do this stuff, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't. Xbox does a lot of things that lose them money, but they do it because it's either the right thing to do or it garners them goodwill, like the adaptive controller, right? They didn't need to do that. They don't earn much money off of that, I doubt. But it was for the betterment of the gaming industry and its consumers in general. And I just wish PlayStation did more of that stuff, because I think people who own the console deserve those type of things. That's the bummer. So we'll see what happens. Let's talk about what we've been playing, Dom. Will I continue to sound like a smoker? Let me get some water. Can you please tell me what you've been playing recently?
So it's still only been Dark Souls 2, man. It's been great fun. I can add now, because I finally this was the first time I've gone through the DLC, and it was excellent. It was for one, probably the hardest, maybe the hardest or close to the hardest From Software content that exists.
Who's the final boss in the DLC? I don't remember if I played that DLC.
Well, there's 3 and they're really separate. So it's not necessarily.
It's the king dude, right? It's the girl. It's like the woman he found that like backstabbed him, right?
I don't know about any of that, but
yeah, the king character is at the main game that he's the final boss.
Yeah, like King Vendrick is in the main game.
And the woman, the main female boss is the girl. Like he got with her, and then she like kind of stabbed him in the back because he found out that she was part of Manus, right? And then
that's the main game. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because then the final boss, like you have to fight Vendrick, but then shortly thereafter, the final boss was the queen. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, who are the bosses of the DLC? I kind
of. Yeah, I mean. There's one that I've seen a lot in like, memes or GIFs or whatever. This Fume Knight guy, and oof, he was a doozy. But just the levels themselves were just like, I think like there were tougher bosses in Sekiro and Bloodborne and things like that. But for 2 of these DLCs specifically, like a lot of the levels were just brutally tough. But they also were some of the best designed levels. In any From Software games, like better than like the core Dark Souls 2 game in a lot of ways. But they also did something way different than any other FromSoft game. They really leaned into puzzle mechanics and like dungeon mechanics. They pulled a lot more out of Zelda dungeons in these DLCs, which was really cool because that stuff is like littered throughout a lot of From games, but usually it's just small bits, right? Like small environmental puzzles that like, oh, you unlock this bridge or kick down this ladder. Sometimes like you change the environment in bigger ways in From games, but for these DLC it was more like in one, for example, there's a lot of switches that like manipulate giant physical objects, in the dungeon that dictate where you can and can't get to, or like, oh, there's the floor is on the ceiling now, that kind of stuff, or everything in this level is frozen until you do something else later on, and then you go back, and now a lot of the objects and contraptions are now unfrozen. You can interact, stuff like that, right? So like that it was really great. Like this was all great DLC in general. So now I've had a lot of fun with that. Then had to continue on towards the platinum pursuit. So I just actually finished with a whole lot of farming. That was not the most fun, but now I'm just another New Game Plus playthrough away from locking in this platinum, and then I can feel like I can just breathe for a minute. So it's been a lot of hard games lately for me.
You were talking about the levels feeling better designed than anything in the base game of Dark Souls 2, and obviously the base game was directed by a pair of people that weren't Miyazaki, right? So I knew about Tomohiro Shibuya, but I didn't recognize the name Yui Tanimura. They were co-directors, right, on the base game of Dark Souls 2. But on the DLC, Tomohiro Shibuya is nowhere to be seen, and it's only Yui Tanimura that was the director for the DLC stuff. So that's interesting. I wonder, even though they're listed as co-directors, I wonder if the base game, maybe Tomohiro Shibuya had a little bit more say, and that's why the game doesn't feel as well designed as maybe the DLC or obviously the other From games. That was curious. When you mentioned that, I was like, I wonder if the DLC was directed by the same person. Technically, yeah, but it's missing one of the two co-directors. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit.
It definitely has a different feel to it. Like when you get into the DLC, immediately my mind was like, okay, whoever like created this DLC was a way bigger fan of the Legend of Zelda games than who created the rest of the Dark Souls.
Yeah, and the interesting thing too is Miyazaki served as a supervisor for the base game, and I wonder if he kind of like maybe strong-armed his supervision a little bit more in the DLC, or if it was the opposite, and maybe he was like, you want to try something different, and maybe the Yui Tanimura was the one that liked a lot more of the puzzle aspects, because even the base game of Dark Souls 2 has more puzzle elements than a lot of the other Dark Souls games. So I wonder if maybe those aspects of the game were his influence, but the overall design stuff maybe was the other, director. And then with the DLC, he kind of was able to like show his muscle in terms of doing puzzle stuff. Who knows?
That's more the vibe I got, right? So in the base game, if you remember, there's those Pharaoh's contraptions, right? Basically, you just shove a little block, and then something changes in the environment. And there were a lot of those in the base game, but like that concept or that kind of idea, way more heavily used in the DLC. So I think it's like kind of like what you said, like someone maybe like got let off the reins a little bit and just really dove into that part of it. And I really liked it. It was really cool. It was much different than than like what most of the other From Software games have going on. So I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Awesome. Do you think when Elden Ring comes out, do you think you'll immediately try to hunt down that plat, or do you think it'll be a type of situation where when you finish it, you'll want a breather and maybe a year or so later you'll come back for that plat?
It will be immediate, but for something like that, what I like to do, so whereas like Dark Souls 2 going through now, I've already played it before. I kind of went through having, parsed through a trophy guide, right? To kind of make sure I do things in the most efficient manner. And that's not always like the most fun, natural way necessarily to play a game, right? So
especially for the first time.
Exactly. And so that's where I draw the distinction. It's like, okay, well, Elden Ring is going to be, for one, it's going to be brand new. So like this trophy guide won't even exist yet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they get those out pretty quick, but not quick enough, right? So, I want to definitely let the first playthrough be totally natural, whatever I'm feeling, without much influence, figure things out on your own, or do like the kind of cool community thing where someone, on forums or people like, oh, I did this and it worked out this way, and you're kind of learning stuff like in real time. Like that's always fun. But then after that, once I'm into the second playthrough, then I'll take a more serious look at what trophies I got left, how do we get them, and then we'll figure out how to get that platinum, because it will happen, but not in like the most efficient manner possible that sometimes I take.
So you said you're taking a break from difficult games. Obviously, we're in April. We're heading towards. Obviously, I know you're not a baseball guy, so MLB The Show's a no-go. What are your thoughts on? Are you going to hop into Returnal next when it comes out at the end of the month?
Ooh, yeah. So it's that. Which I got a strong eye on that. See how that looks, because it's looked promising so far, but I'm not typically big on like the roguelite stuff. So we'll see. I just want to see some reviews for it and see some longer gameplay for that. But that's next on the list, especially as far as new stuff, because it's kind of sparse, but plenty in the backlog still too. So.
And what about? It's not this month; it's next month. What about Resident Evil Village?
That's May.
Yeah, beginning of May. It's first week of May.
Yeah, I'll be there immediately for that. That without a question.
Awesome.
I'm very excited for that. That's like, I forgot all about it, but that's top of the list. Like I'm hype on that.
Me too. In terms of what I've been playing, I recently hopped back into Apex Legends. I'm still playing Warzone and all the other stuff, but they recently announced that the next season of Apex Legends is going to feature a lot of Titanfall influence. I love Titanfall 1 and 2. Obviously, Apex Legends takes place in the same universe, but it doesn't have the Titans. It doesn't have the similar guns. It's kind of its own thing, existing in the world of Titanfall. And them announcing that it's going to have a huge influence of Titanfall, I'm like, we're probably not getting Titanfall 3, if ever. So I kind of wanted to hop in, get familiar, so by the time Season 9 starts in May, I'll be acclimated with the game again. I'm not stumbling around like an idiot. I will say, like, Apex Legends and Warzone are both fantastic. Hopping into Apex Legends, I forgot how fluid the movement is in that game. It just feels so good. And the guns feel fantastic, but so they do as well in Call of Duty Warzone. It's just a different vibe, and they've had multiple maps, whereas Warzone's had the same map for a year, and that's kind of waiting on people. People are waiting for the next Warzone map, which is supposed to drop in, weeks to months, and it's getting stale because people want something new, and people aren't necessarily wanting the Fortnite thing where like the map changes every 30 days, right, or they add something new, but they want something more immediate than once a year. And Apex Legends has kind of found that sweet spot where every maybe 5 to 6 months they either introduce a new map or they retool like sections of the map. So they found that nice middle ground there. And yeah, having a blast with that. The other thing I've dipped my toes into, thanks to the power of Xbox Game Pass, Outriders. Obviously, Outriders came out, Square Enix's new games of service that isn't a games of service. So what I'll say is from the story and voice acting, it's generic, the video game. It feels like it was ripped out of like 2008. Like, it's just a video game-ass video game. There's nothing special to write home about that. After trying it out for the first like 20 to 30 minutes, I've just skipped through every line of dialogue and everything because it's so corny and cringy and basic, or typical sci-fi laissez-faire stuff. Gameplay is,
I was gonna say, and then the
gameplay is fun. It's a fun game. Okay. The shooting mechanics are good. I wouldn't say they're great, and I wouldn't say they're bad. They're good. The hook of the game is that you choose a class at the beginning. One has to do with like sniping and turrets. Another one is like up close fire attacks. And in each of those classes, it's like, okay, the sniper class, obviously your range. The fire attack, you're kind of mid range. And there's another one where it's like shotguns in close range and you're melee killing people. You don't gain health back normally like in most shooters where if you wait a bit of time, your health automatically regenerates. You have to be active. So it's kind of like Bloodborne in that way, where it kind of rewards aggressive play. So like for the fire character, if you burn people to death, you gain health back that way, and every character has their own thing. It's fun to play alone, which is always a thing I looked for in games of service titles, is if I feel fulfilled without playing with friends. As an interesting scaling system where you can move things back and forth actively, and it doesn't like call you out for it and doesn't make you feel bad, and it works dynamically that way, the tier level of the world. I don't know how much longer I'm going to play it. It feels really generic. Like, the gameplay is cool and all, but with so many other games I want to play, I don't know if I can just have my hooks in a thing where I'm trying to get better and better loot without being attached to it. And I know you're saying, Jerrad, but you talk about Avengers all the time. It's like, yeah, Avengers has an Avengers skin on it. Like, I like playing with those characters. The voice acting is leaps and bounds better than Outriders. Yeah. You have some of the best voice actors in the industry.
I'm guessing the story is, too.
Exactly. The single-player campaign, I would recommend anybody play that for the Avengers. Multiplayer, obviously there's some stuff going on there. But, like, it's just not enough for me. It's just not. Something like The Division, the gunplay is way better than Outriders, so even though I'm not fully invested in the world, I'd give that more of a chance. Whereas this is like, the story isn't really engaging, the gameplay is good, not great, and I don't have enough friends to be interested in this to justify it. Like, say I had a couple of friends, Dom, they're like, they have Game Pass, and okay, let's just play Outriders. I'd be down to play for, at least a couple of weeks in terms of like, a couple of nights a week, hopping in, having fun, just shooting stuff, killing stuff. Cool. I just don't have that, so there's not enough there for me to continue playing it. Is it a bad game? No. Is it a great game? No. It's just a game. And that's good for some times and some people and stuff. It's just like, I'm not looking for just a game to play. You know what I mean? I hope that doesn't sound as harsh as I feel it sounds, but yeah.
No, I get the vibe too. Because I watched a little bit of gameplay, and I'm thinking like, yeah, this looks fun. Like, this could be cool, but like, if I'm going to play a game like that, I'm like, first of all, I'd be closer to Avengers, because that's at least like enough characters that I'm familiar enough with, and a story I'll be able to connect to better than like kind of a generic sci-fi business. It's sort of the same thing where I never like got too much into Destiny. It's like, if you're not going to do much story, then you at least have to have like a skin that's cool that I like, So,
and as vague as Destiny's story is, it's actually more coherent than this, even though they put so many cutscenes and lines of dialogue in this damn game. It's like, ugh.
Yeah, and so like every time one of these games comes up, I kind of go through that cycle of like, well, this looks fun, I might try this out. I'm like, no, if I was gonna play a games of service game like this, it would be something like Destiny that controls and feels way better. And I'm like, yeah, but if I was gonna play Destiny, then I'd rather just play Avengers, because it's gonna be that same kind of repetitive. I don't know if that's the right word, but like that.
Yeah, repetitive. That's right.
You're in a big room killing a lot of enemies for a while, right?
But at least you get a coherent, engaging, interesting campaign with Avengers, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, cool characters and stuff. And that's why I'm really looking forward to if we get a Star Wars version of this. Then I'm going to be in almost no matter what. Like, that would be the game's
that's your hook, right? That's your in.
Yeah, right. Avengers is close, but Star Wars is going to be like, well, okay, well, I'll be in on that, right?
Man, if that game were to exist and comes out and it has crossplay, we're gonna have to play that together.
No, definitely,
that'd be so dope.
Definitely.
It
won't because Jim Ryan.
Yeah, he's worried about kids playing a game where you kill Nazi variants in space. He doesn't want kids to play with other people in that. That's pretty much it for this week. Yeah, I didn't play much. I'm interested to see where Dom and I land on playing things next week. We talked about the Deathloop delay, man. It's a weird year. Like, I want to play a lot of my backlog, but then we have like Resident Evil on the way, so I'm going to see what other smaller games I can tackle in between then, because I want to play Resident Evil Day 1 because we kind of have been so starved with major game releases that we're interested in. I know some people have had some games that they've really enjoyed. But with E3 returning, I'm excited for what this year holds, and we'll see what happens. We'll catch you guys next week. Hopefully there's some news around the table. Maybe we get some updates on Final Fantasy VII Remake coming to Xbox and PC. But until then, we'll catch you guys next time. Please follow us on YouTube. We search Controlled Interest will pop right up. Hit the like button if you like the video. Hit subscribe if you enjoy it. Comment. Let us know what you think of E3 coming back. How do you feel about Outriders and games that are just games? In terms of Twitter, you can follow Dom at DomZorios. You can follow me at Jerrad Wyche. That's JerradWyche. You can follow us collectively at Controlled Interest, which is at CTRLINT. It's Controlled Interest abbreviated. We're on Instagram, Controlled Interest. So that's your preferred social media platform over Twitter. And listen to us on Spotify. That's my preferred podcast listening space. I think it's really great. I recently got a new desktop update for Spotify, which makes it run and feel a lot smoother. So search Controlled Interests on there and we'll pop right up as well. Until next time, you'll see Dom and I likely next week. Bye.